Well, finally getting around to working on my pickup. I've been procrastinating on this for a year now. Actually, I was going to try to get it done this summer when I got the airplane finished, but things didn't work out. I wanted to get it in the hangar there where I had room to get around it and a hardwood floor or a wood floor to work on and stuff. But we didn't get the airplane moved out of there this year, so I've been able to get it in my shop by squeezing it over and do one side at a time. What I needed to do on these was the brakes on the rear end and the front end, and I got new ball joints for the front end. I have to take the wheels off and repack the bearings on those. They got Yukon hubs in there, so we can disconnect the front hubs. And they've got wheel bearings in them that you can pack. Anyway, I went to order the parts for it, and of course nobody would ship the parts up here to Alaska. So I had them shipped down to my son in Oregon, and we made the trip down there and then shipped them home with a bunch of other stuff, so the cost wasn't quite so high on them. Then I've been working on other things. We had clear cold weather the other day, and I rented a man lift and had to put new Tyvek up around the house. And I haven't really had much incentive to work. It just doesn't seem like I have much drive here lately with this cool weather in the 30s and pouring down rain every day. The sun doesn't come up till after 8. Goes down before 3 now. We got, I think, 7 hours of daylight now. But then most days it's thick overcast, so it doesn't really get very light. And then my cold tolerance is not near what it used to be. I just get chilled a lot quicker than I used to and don't like working outside here, so I've been procrastinating on this. I finally decided I better get started at it. So it's been rattling for a while, and last year I got new shocks for it and took it to a shop and had a guy put new shocks on it. He was supposed to check it out and lube everything and stuff, and he didn't do a very good job because I got to checking in the caliper on the right rear wheel. The dowels on it that it slides back and forth on had rusted off, and that thing had fallen in and was riding on the inside of the rear wheel. I'd just redone those the year before, 2 years ago. I'd taken them all apart. I had to put new wheel seals in. The right side was leaking, and I replaced the wheel seals in both the right and the left side. Rebuilt those parking brake hangers and the parking brakes and everything, and put new pads on and cleaned everything up and put them together. But those pins, the dowel pins that it slides back and forth on both sides were rusty. The ones on the right side had fallen completely off. Well, I got a new caliper and put on that side and cleaned up the one on the left side. I still didn't get to the front end. So anyway, now I'm getting to that. I did the right side, pulled it apart, and that caliper there was almost completely froze up. The pad on the inside was completely gone, and it ate into the rotor pretty bad, and the one on the outside was almost like new, but it was crudded up. The silt and sand and dirt and stuff like that was so thick on there I had to chip it off with a hammer. The parking brake was actually in pretty good shape on it, except for being dirty. Once I cleaned it cleaned up real good, and it works perfect. So anyway, I got a new rotor on there, a new caliper on there. I just moved the truck over to the other side here, and now I'm working on the left side. I just pulled that left wheel off of there, the tire and wheel, and looked at that. And that caliper actually looked pretty good. The brake pads on there, the outside one was hardly anywhere on it, and the inside one was only about half wore, maybe less than that. I was almost tempted just to leave it all together and put it back, the tire back on, the wheel back on, and go with it. But I got to investigating a little further, and that caliper was loose on there. Those pins were wore, and they'd hogged out in the little holes. So I went ahead and took that caliper off there, and I cleaned up the parking brake now, and I let it dry. I just washed it down with solvent, and then did a final wash with brake cleaner on those parking brake shoes. I'm going to let all that flash off, get that other rotor out, and put it on, and put that other caliper on there, and then hopefully my rear end will be in good shape again. Or at least the truck's rear end will be in good shape again. I don't know about my rear end. It used to be, in the good old days of drum brakes, that the front brakes would always wear out twice as fast as the rear brakes. You'd have to replace the front brakes or work on them, and then you'd only do the rear brakes every other time. There'd hardly be any wear on those. Even when they went to disc brakes on the front and drum brakes on the rear, it was the same way. But it seems like both these new vehicles that I've had that had disc brakes on all four wheels, the rear wheels wear out twice as fast as the front wheels, front brakes. And that right rear brake is the one that seems to get the most wear. I've had more trouble with that one than all the rest of them combined. And talking to the agent there, the gal there at Napa, they say that 90% of the time, if they got a brake problem, it's the right rear caliper or the right rear brake on the cars. I don't know why that is, and maybe that's the one that picks up all the road grime and salt and stuff off the roads and whatnot and builds up on it. But that's sure been true with this vehicle. The right rear one is the one that gives the most trouble. All right, I got that brake assembly all disassembled and cleaned up. The old rotor was actually in serviceable condition. It's just got a little ridge around the outside edge of it there, but the brake pads were in good shape. The caliper was in good shape, except for these pins here that it slides back and forth on were ate out or something, and it was sloppy on there. This whole thing was sloppy on there. And then the parking brake was in good shape, but it was dirty, so I cleaned it up, washed it out real good, cleaned it up, and then I got a new rotor and put on. Like I said, the old rotor is okay, but I've got new parts for it. I can save the old one for a spare. I adjusted the parking brake to where it's right, to where it just doesn't contact the drum, so when I step on the parking brake and set it, I'll have brakes. And I did that to the right side too. I haven't had them adjusted properly before, and I didn't have any parking brake. So now I've got it adjusted properly, and I'll have parking brakes for when I stop the truck with a trailer on it and load and unload the equipment, so I'm not dependent entirely on the transmission. And I got my new calipers on there. I got new brake pads, the new caliper on. I've got it set, tightened up on there, and I put it back together with new crush washers that came with the kit with the caliper. And now I'm ready to start bleeding the brake line. I started with the right side. That's the old tried and true way of doing it that they recommend in the books, is starting at the one farthest away from the master cylinder, bleeding it first and then working your way forward. So on these it'd be the right rear, right front, and left front, but I'm going to work on the left front first when I get to the front, because I've got a lot of stuff to do on the right. I've got to take the fender off and replace the fender liner and straighten the fender out from when the tire blew up on it last year. So anyway, I'm ready to bleed the brakes. I've got my one-man brake bleeder on there. They call it a one-man brake bleeder, but it is better if you have two people, one to watch and one to pump the brakes. This is a cheap setup. I think it was $8 or $9 out of Napa. It's got about 20 cents worth of parts to it. It's got this vinyl hose coming out. I've got it into an old pickle jar so I can watch for the bubbles in it and have a receptacle for the brake fluid. Then it's got this, I guess, is the one-way valve here. And then they've got a little short section of what passes for rubber hose on there, and a spring on it to retain it. So it's supposed to stick on this nipple here, this bleeder valve on its own, because it won't stay on. There's so much pressure on there, it'll blow off of the bleeder nipple. So I put the spring over the bleeder nipple, and then it blows off of this hose barb here. So I got a piece of safety wire wrapped around there and tightened it up now so that it won't blow off of that. So anyway, I have to make sure my master reservoir is full and start the truck up, and they can start bleeding the brakes. And it took quite a bit on the right side to get all the air out of it, because we're sitting downhill at a pretty good angle here, and the fluid, just gravity, flowed out of there. And plus you've got this cavity in here for the cylinders to fill up too. So anyway, I'll start the bleeding process here. Years ago I had a one-man brake bleeder that I really liked. It had the hose here that would hook onto your bleeder, and then it run down, and it had an aluminum end on it that was heavy enough it would pull that line straight and drop down into the receptacle that you had for the fluid. It was aluminum, it was machined out, and it had a ball that fit in against the socket to shut it off with a spring behind it and a little bleeder on the end of it, and that thing worked really good. I really liked it, but it sat somewhere for a few years when I didn't use it, and the aluminum piece got all corroded up, didn't work right anymore. Made a ball of aluminum dust. Anyway, these are the new replacements, and these are cheap. The operative word on there is cheap. They work though, I guess. Sometimes I would just wound up using that like you would just a standard bleed the brakes, just to put it on there and lay underneath there, or close it, have somebody pump the brake up and hold it and then crack it open. That's just the old standby. But this one worked okay on the other side. Okay, I got fluid coming through it now, so my wife come back home. Still got a lot of air in there. Until looking in the jar, it's all foamy. And in the line, it's all white, it's not clear. So we'll keep doing that. I'll get my wife to help me. Now I'll watch it while she pumps the brakes. And the nice thing about this is it gets all the old fluid out of there. So, I mean, just let it sit for a minute between times so air has a chance to, bubbles have a chance to come together. Well, one of the things I have to do is keep the master cylinder filled up. The last thing you want to do is let the fluid level get down below the level of the master cylinder, so I'll keep that reservoir filled up. Well, even though this bleeder is open and I've got it pretty loose, there's still a lot of pressure, that brake fluid coming out of there. You can see it wiggling everything when it applies, and that was blowing this hose right off of this hose barb here if we didn't have something to hold it on, and then this spring would just blow off, or this rubber piece would just blow off the nipple if I didn't have it on there. Okay, I gotta see what's going on now. I got a leak someplace there. Anyway, we'll keep doing this till we get it bled out. A lot easier with somebody there pumping the brakes, so you can stand here and watch it and see when the bubbles quit on it. But we got it to where it's pretty clear coming through there. Well, it's totally clear coming through there. Didn't take near as much as it did on the other side, so we'll take this bleeder off of there if I can get it there. Come off that nipple. And a jar. And I've got a bucket here with some sawdust in it that I've been putting sawdust down on the floor here to collect the drippings, and I've got a bucket there. I put the sawdust in and I just dump that brake fluid in the bucket, and then I use that for fire starter in the wood stove. I thought maybe I had a leak in this banjo fitting here because it was dripping a little bit, but it was coming out of that fitting when it was loose there, so I want to spray that all down a little bit, make sure and get all the oil off of it so the dirt and stuff doesn't stick to it. I got a nipple cover to go back over that nipple that came on it. I'll put that on there, and that's that. I can put the tire and wheel back on there, and this rear end will be done.